All right, let's dive straight into this really fascinating explainer on human origins. Now, normally, when we think about where we came from, the journey starts by, digging up ancient bones and fossils. We're looking deep into the earth. It's a purely physical search, and it's completely defined our scientific history for generations. We look at skull fragments and ancient tools, just trying to piece together our past. But today, we're going to flip that narrative completely upside down. We're looking at an entirely different direction to find out where we actually come from, exploring a perspective that kind of challenges literally everything we thought we knew about the beginning of humanity.
I mean, science has obviously achieved remarkable things mapping out our physical history. There is absolutely no doubt about that, right? We've traced lineages back millions of years. But this actually brings up a staggering question that really forces us to hit pause and rethink our whole approach. What if the deeper beginning of humanity doesn't lie in the physical body at all? What if the true origin point is actually consciousness itself? We spend so much time hunting for the first human footprint, but maybe, just maybe, we should be looking for the first human thought, that very first moment of true subjective awareness.
To really understand this shift in perspective, let's start with something we're all super familiar with. We all know the standard scientific story that builds this magnificent narrative of evolutionary and cosmic history. We start with the explosive chaos of the Big Bang, roughly 13.8 billion years ago. Then we zoom forward to the era of giant reptiles roaming the Earth, and we follow that unbroken physical chain all the way to us, sitting here right now in the present day. It's this neat, perfectly orderly timeline of physical events, just happening one after another.
But here's the thing. This brings us to a profound philosophical glitch that almost nobody talks about. Think about it for a second. A fossil lying in the dirt doesn't explain itself. Time itself fundamentally requires a subject to recognize the sequence of past, present, and future. Without an observer to piece those physical fragments together and actually experience the passage of time, does a history of evolution even make sense? A timeline is just a concept, and you can't have a concept without a mind there to conceive it. So the crucial takeaway here is that evolution, the biological reality, and the theory of evolution, the scientific framework, are not the same thing. Biological change happening out in the wild, like mutations in cells, is one thing, but the explanation of it is a completely human construct. Charles Darwin didn't invent biological change in nature, but his theory absolutely required his conscious mind to actively observe organisms, compare species, and logically organize all of that chaotic data into a cohesive story we could actually understand. Let's be real for a minute. DNA doesn't sit down and draw its own family tree. A dusty bone lying in the dirt never just clears its throat and says, "Hey there, I'm your ancestor." It literally takes a conscious observer to dig up that bone, brush off the dirt, arrange the evidence through our human concept of time, and build that grand story we call evolutionary history. Without an active, participating mind, that bone is just a silent, meaningless fragment buried out in the earth.
To really ground this whole idea, we have to look back at the brilliant 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant. Now, Kant argued something truly revolutionary for his time. He said that space and time are not just physical realities floating out there in the cold, dark universe. Instead, they're the mandatory lenses through which human beings experience phenomena. Think of space and time not as a room you just walk into, but more like a pair of permanent virtual reality goggles strapped to your face. You simply cannot experience anything without them. They are the fundamental, built-in forms of our perception. And this leads to a staggeringly weird paradox. If time and space are just human cognitive lenses, if they're literally just the specific way our minds process reality, how in the world do we reconstruct a past reality, like the fiery early Earth, that existed long before human minds were even around to look through those lenses? It's wild to think about. We're actively using our modern, conscious minds to build a detailed picture of a past that existed before minds were even here to perceive it. Let's zoom out to astrophysics and see how this builds, because the exact same rule applies. Just like with evolution, a possible cosmic event is fundamentally different from the science we use to describe it. The actual universe, the burning stars, colliding galaxies, dark matter, that is nature. But cosmology is consciousness at work. It's human logic trying to wrap itself around that raw nature to make it understandable to a human mind. Just think about the actual language we use to describe all this stuff. When Georges Lemaitre and modern cosmologists talk about the Big Bang, they use very specific words like a beginning, an earlier universe, expansion, and cosmic history. Every single one of those concepts is entirely understood through our human perceptions of time, space, and causality. I mean, you can't even say the word beginning without completely relying on a human understanding of how time flows.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core mystery we're unpacking in this explainer. Is it possible we've simply projected human cognition backward into a reality that existed long before human observers? The Big Bang Theory, as a structured, understandable narrative that we teach in schools every day, absolutely requires a mind to process time and space. Without a conscious mind to frame it, what is it? Just this silent, unobserved unfolding of energy?
Classical science, for a really long time, tried its best to remove the observer completely, so it could describe the world objectively. The whole goal was to measure the object and just completely ignore the person measuring it. But modern physics, specifically quantum mechanics, threw a massive wrench into that idea. It complicated this picture immensely by raising these profound, unavoidable questions about the role of observation itself. It literally brought the observer right back to the dead center of the equation.
It is honestly wild to think that 18th century philosophy and modern quantum physics share such a startling similarity, but they absolutely do. They both boldly challenge the assumption that we can discuss the known world without deeply examining the knower. Whether you're talking about Kant's conditions for experience or a modern physicist's conditions for measurement, the conclusion is exactly the same. You cannot separate the physical description of reality from the conditions of the conscious mind that's measuring it.
Think about the Jurassic period for a second. Since no paleontologist was actually there taking notes and snapping photos, our entire understanding of it, every single towering T-Rex skeleton, every dramatic extinction event, is constructed entirely from present traces, by present consciousness. So the age of dinosaurs, as an ordered scientific history, literally exists within our consciousness, right now, today. The past is quite literally a construction of the present mind.
So if evolutionary history and cosmic history are only known through consciousness, it really forces us to rethink a massive scientific assumption. Perhaps the priority of physical matter over the mind isn't as self-evident as we always assumed. Why do we just automatically accept the idea that your consciousness, your vivid inner world, was just this late, secondary, random accident that popped out of dead matter millions of years after the universe began? Because when you look closely, history is really defined by this one enduring truth. In every single generation, bodies age and change, faces disappear into the sands of time, and names are completely forgotten. Yet, generation after generation, a conscious subject always wakes up, looks around, and declares its own undeniable presence with two simple words: I exist. It's the one absolute constant in a physical world that is constantly changing.
And that means we have to ask where the very first I came from. How does a clump of physical, completely unconscious matter, like neurons and a brain, cross this invisible, almost magical boundary to suddenly have a subjective experience? Science can map the brain lighting up, sure. It can show us the neural correlations of sadness or joy, but it cannot tell us who is looking at the lights. It hasn't fully explained why there's someone in there experiencing it at all. This leads us far, far beyond a standard biological family tree. We aren't just tracing DNA and physical traits anymore. We're tracing a genealogy of consciousness itself. We go from my consciousness today, back to my ancestors, back to the very first human consciousness, and ultimately pointing backward to what we might call original consciousness, a true starting point not of matter, but of mind.
Which brings us to a foundational, absolutely undeniable reality. Even if you doubt everything around you, even if you think this entire universe is just a computer simulation or some crazy dream, the very act of you doubting it proves that you're conscious. It's the most immediate, undeniable fact available to you. Before you can even begin to construct a theory about matter or evolution or the universe, consciousness is already happening, right here and right now. Since you didn't choose to be born, you didn't design your own awareness, and you certainly didn't write the first line of your own I, we're left wondering, who or what stands behind this unfolding drama of subjective experience? If human life is a drama with characters and a world that unfolds before us, who is the actual author of consciousness? Where does that capacity to experience even originate?
The implications of this are absolutely massive. Humanity might not be the physical center of the universe. We know we orbit a pretty random average star out in the suburbs of a vast galaxy, but because the universe is measured, historically mapped, and understood exclusively by our minds, we are its absolute epistemological center, meaning we are the absolute center of how anything is known or experienced at all. Without the mind, the universe is just silent, unobserved data.
And this leads us to what might just be the ultimate cosmic joke. We're caught in this bizarre loop. The mind studies the physical brain under a microscope. It analyzes its chemical makeup, only for the mind to boldly declare to itself that it's just a byproduct of the brain. It's consciousness using itself to explain itself away as a mere accident of matter. It's a really strange, self-defeating circle of logic when you think about it.
For centuries, humanity has searched relentlessly downward to explain our existence. We've dug deep into the earth for fossils, mapped out ancient bones, zoomed way in to microscopic genes, cells, and neurons. We've continuously looked deeper and deeper into the physical building blocks of reality, basically hoping that if we just find a small enough particle, we'll finally uncover the ultimate answer to who we are.
But perhaps it's time to invert our perspective entirely. Perhaps human history didn't begin when a primitive bone finally took a human shape. Perhaps the true beginning of our world was when the first eye opened its eyes and a reality actually appeared to an observer. Because who sees the fossil? Who understands the gene? Who reconstructs the past? You do. The conscious mind does.
Which leaves us with one final profound mystery to chew on. If the observer is the true origin point of known reality, and if everything points back to an original consciousness, why would that one original consciousness splinter into so many billions of individual experiencing minds? It's an unavoidable mystery that leaves us wanting to explore the depths of our own awareness even further. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it shifted how you see your own mind. Catch you next time.